What are we talking about? What are we doing here?
Well, welcome to the Rick Bisson podcast.
Love it. That's a great name.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it.
Yeah, so I'm really happy to have Brad Knowles
Mm,
as our guest today and
Happy to
look
be here.
forward to hearing from you about a couple of things.
Sure.
We'll talk about coaching.
Yeah.
We'll talk about transplants
Sure.
and just a brief introduction so everybody can get up to speed on who you are.
Sure.
So Keller Williams
Yeah.
and Knowles Development.
Yeah. Big parts of my life, definitely.
Yeah.
I currently run an office for Keller Williams in the state of Maine,
Mm.
and we've got a little over 500 agents and have been in that role for Keller Williams in a couple of different states since 2009.
Yeah.
And I was a real estate agent before that.
Mhm.
Husband and wife team,
Mm,
right?
Nice. Yes.
So,
I like that.
yeah, so a lot of good stuff there.
And current team leader
team leader for Portland, Maine.
for the Portland, Maine, which
Yep.
is the primary market center for the
Yep.
state.
Yeah.
And like you said, 500 plus agents, and also the number one agent for Keller Williams nationwide.
We're the largest office in the state of Maine, period, in
Mhm.
terms of any brand. And we were the most profitable last year out of all of Keller Williams. So that's about 840 offices in North America.
Yeah.
Um,
Not Maine, not New England, North America,
yeah.
the whole
Yeah,
country.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a great achievement. Couldn't have done it without our team, great agents like you and your whole business. I mean, nobody gets there alone by any means. So, Keller Williams has been a great company, been involved in all sorts of different levels of it.
Yeah.
18 years in. With
18
them.
years in, yeah. And so team leader and coaching
Yep.
and leadership coaching.
Yeah. So doing that through my own company, Knowles Development.
Mhm.
We launched that a bunch of years ago. I had done professional coaching within Keller Williams. Keller Williams has a coaching company called MAPS. I was a MAPS coach for almost 4 years. Great learning ground for me. Great experience. Still a great coaching company. We have a lot of our agents are involved with coaches through that company. So they do a great job. And then launched my own, continue to coach. It allowed me to start coaching other businesses, not just real estate. So I've got attorneys that I work with and developers, and it's a good mix. So it really selfishly kind of scratches some coaching itches for me, which is great. And then all sorts of training, everything from local CEU, continuing education type classes to leadership development, training, hiring, all that kind of stuff. So it's a good mix of stuff.
Yeah. And Ithaca College.
That's what they tell me.
That's what they say you graduated from.
Yes.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And you met your wife there.
I did.
At Ithaca.
I did.
Yes.
Yes. She was, don't tell anybody listening, she was a freshman and I was a senior. So there you go. There you go.
Secret safe would be.
Yes, exactly. So, we met my last semester of college.
Really?
Yeah. And she was
cool.
working on a show.
Uh-huh.
My background pre-real estate was technical theater production. So that's what I was at Ithaca for. And I was literally working on my last big production. And so I was the technical director overseeing the entire construction of the whole show.
Wow.
She got put on my master carpenter's carpentry crew, which had a reputation of being the hardest gig of any of the crews.
Yeah.
And because it was, it's just a lot of work.
A lot of work.
It's just a lot of work.
Yeah.
So I think she spent the first couple of days trying to get off that crew. And that was somehow unsuccessful. And then she was kind of stuck with me, and we really got to spend a lot of time getting to know each other. So it was a great kickoff to a relationship. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So where were you living at that point in time?
I was in Ithaca. Yeah, I never didn't live on campus.
Okay.
Our program was such where, especially the second and third year of the program, I've been telling my kids this, I think I slept every other day. It was a really intense
theater schedule and demands are crazy.
Because while you're also trying to do 18 credits and you're also picking up side work with all the little theaters in town. And so it was nuts. If I experienced a boot camp in my life, it was that program and some of the things I did during the summers at different theaters and stuff. And it was great. It stretched your kind of ability of what are you able to do, right? What are you able to endure? What are you able to, all that kind of stuff. So it's just good. It was good formative formative stuff. And that's where a lot of the leadership came from.
Yeah.
The show that I met my wife on, I think we had a carpentry crew of 20 some odd. We had a lighting crew of like 15. We had a sound crew. We had a props crew.
Really?
We had a costume crew. So the technical director oversees all of that. The heads of all of it, has to work with the directors, the artistic staff, all that kind of stuff. Tens of thousands of dollars of budgets. So, and for me, one of the formative things was in leadership is what I love about theater is the timeline aspect of it.
Very
because you're sitting at home and you've got tickets on your fridge and they say a date and a time on them. So there's no changing when we have to be done, right? 500 people are going to show up at 7:00 on a Thursday. So we got to be done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what goes off track. It's like, that's nice.
You're ready on that day and time.
Yeah. You're working all the way through the night, a lot, just to make sure it's done.
Yeah.
So, and that's again one of those things that, man, just apply 10% of that to things in your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's really impactful. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. So I read something regarding Knowles Development that really was great. Our perspective on leadership at Knowles Development is that there's servant leaders, and then there's every other leader out there. The difference between a servant leader and other leaders is integrity. Powerful leaders can be very influential, but if they don't have integrity, if they don't put their people and organizations first, they are not a truly effective leader, not a servant leader.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, that's that near the end there, I think, is where the rubber hit the road is as a leader, if you're not putting your people first, if you're not putting the organization first. It's so easy, even just in leading small groups of people, to let it go to your head, get the ego thing happening, right? We're all wired that way. So you have to actively work against it, So, yeah. And, and I think we all fall short of it. So not putting myself on a pedestal by any mean. But yeah, it's, I think there's a real difference between people who show up in that kind of leadership capacity versus a lot more of what we tend to see. And yeah, we're excited about helping people get there. Yeah.
How do you dovetail the Knowles Development and the Keller Williams? I can see some big advantages between what you're getting and what you're giving in those. How does that work?
Yeah. Some of the best stuff that has come from it is I get to coach people. All the people I coach tend to be in the Northeast. I think that's just kind of my natural extension of my sphere of influence. So really from upstate New York, almost going back to the Ithaca days, all the way across the Northeast. And what's great is I tend to see broader trends in certain businesses. I tend to see challenges that businesses are having that some of the other people I coach aren't quite there yet, but man, now that we know that that's going to show up, can begin to anticipate. For a long time, I coached a 500 unit team in Rochester, New York. In fact, the last year I coached them, they were the #1 unit sold team in the whole state of New York.
Wow.
So massive, massive team. And they were about 2x over what our biggest team in the state of Maine was. So I was learning lessons through coaching them that I was able to bring back to our top team masterminds, going like, hey, are you guys thinking about this? Are you? Because it's around the corner. It's coming. So definitely complimentary. And then the KW network is just such a great network for a lot of the teaching that I do too. So, when we launch a class, I'll end up with 4 or 5 different time zones showing up to a virtual class that we'll do, and 85% of it's KW people. So yeah, they're very complimentary. It's good. That's good stuff.
That. Yeah. And so I missed in the introduction, you're from Auburn, Maine?
We did live in Auburn, Maine.
Yeah.
Quick history of travel of homes. Was born in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, you were born in Lancaster.
Yeah.
Okay.
My parents were divorced when I was super young, like 2. That moved us back to my dad's home area of Quincy, Mass. So we were living in Quincy and Dorchester, Mass. And then after getting robbed a couple of times living there, my dad was like, got to be a better way. And he had been to Maine once for a weekend, thought it was nice. We moved to Maine. And
you were how old at that time?
I was just 5 or 6. So anybody from Maine knows I'm from away,
Mm-hmm.
even though I've been here most of the rest of the
I was
time.
going to say, you've already 5 or 6 years put you way outside of being
Way
a
outside
native.
of being a Mainer.
Yeah.
Exactly. I can't drink enough Moxie to be a Mainer. So we happened to move to Falmouth, tiny little cape that was in rough shape, and spent most of my school years getting that thing fixed up. And then I graduated from Falmouth, went to Ithaca. I was gone for about 10 years, went from Ithaca to New York City to Los Angeles, and then Northern California up Eureka. And that's actually where my wife and I got married. And then we moved back a year later, and we moved into that same house that we'd worked on. My
Really?
parents had owned it the whole time, had rented it out because they'd moved when I was about 18 to a different house in Falmouth. And yeah, it was great. We rented that while we were building a house in Auburn. So that's what brought us to Auburn,
Gotcha.
which was the same time I got into real estate,
Yes.
which was the same time Keller Williams opened an office in Auburn. Like it all, February 2005, it all happened in the same month.
Wow, big year,
My
big
wife
month.
sold that house as her first sale in real estate. We moved into the house that we had built, and I got licensed in real estate, and KW opened in Auburn. All happened in the same month.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was busy.
Is February historically your month? Because some of us have months, it seems.
It is funny. I think the month actually for me tends to be more July, and I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
I started in the team leader role on July 1st in 2009, and when Kathy hired me to come back into the TL role here in Maine, it was on July 1st. So there's been a lot of stuff that kind of in and around the middle of the year, you know. My wedding anniversary is mid-June, end of June, that kind of stuff. So I think it's might be more that time frame, but yeah.
So, moving into let's talk about your health a little bit.
Sure.
So, at some point in time in your life, you realized that you had a genetic or a family trait. Tell us about that.
Yeah, an exciting, family gift.
That blossomed into many more things and opportunities.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So my dad's side of the family, coincidentally, the boys in his generation and the boys in his father's generation, and so far the boys in my generation, though that's not how the condition works necessarily, just coincidentally so far in our family, have a condition called polycystic kidneys, and it's where your kidneys are riddled with cysts. It's not like, oh, there's a bump on my, no. The kidney is cysts. If you don't want to, eat lunch today, go Google what a polycystic kidney looks like, and you won't be hungry for 6 hours. So, so right after my first semester of freshman year of Ithaca, I went and got tested for it because we'd all been told, like, well, you got to wait till you're at least 18. So while I was on that first break, I went and got an ultrasound, and they called me on Christmas Eve and went, yeah, just so you know, we got their test results back, and, you're positive for, and da-da-da. And this is my level of ignorance. I asked, like, well, is that the kind of thing that you get, like, a second opinion on, or da-da-da? And the nurse went, yeah, no, you got it. Like, oh, so that's my Christmas present. So, and I think where
did you go because you were not feeling well?
No, I go because of the family history
Okay.
of it.
Yeah.
My dad's oldest brother was already starting to have some kind of early complications from it. My dad was fine health-wise at the time, but his father had died of it before he was 50. All of his father's brothers, he was one of 7, 6 of them were boys. Half of those boys had it. None of them made it to 50.
Wow.
So when I got diagnosed, all the men in my family were in their late 40s, and were all beginning to have kind of some issues having to deal with it. So at the time, I realized, like, oh, I don't have the same clock other people have. I have a different timeline. And especially as a coach, I realized that there's a part of my wiring is like, no, I'm lazy. I'm a procrastinator. Like, what's my base gear? My base gear is I want to be on a couch covered in Doritos. Like, that's my baseline. And then this thing came along and just kind of kicked me in the butt and went like, dude, if you're going to do anything, you gotta get after it. So my early goal became have a job waiting for me when I get out of college. because so many kids at that time, we were already beginning to see that like boomerang thing where, they go off to school, maybe even have a first job, and then kind of end up at home. And, just a little challenge launching, which I don't know as if that really existed before the Gen X group. Maybe it did, but it seemed like it really started showing up in my generation and has continued.
It was a boom.
It was a boom. Right. Yeah. And so that just became a singular thing. And I was able to do that. And then when I started getting a relationship with my wife and we were dating, she ended up back in California and I was in New York City. And I remember being in my apartment in New York going like, man, if this is one of those things you're going to regret if you don't go see where this could go. So I had an incredible job offer the week that I decided that I was going to California. Really? I literally had a job. I was working for Blue Man Group right in New York.
Really? Yeah.
I was a master carpenter. We were working on building out what was going to become their Las Vegas show. And I ended up turning down the technical director job for all of Blue Man, which at the time already had 3 shows in 3 different states. I mean, it's exactly what I went to school for.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly what I went to school for. I'm like, nah, got to go to California, see about a girl. And so, so I went off and, obviously right choice. And, there was lots of work in California. So work was never the issue. And, and then it wasn't until, it's one of those things where there's not a lot you can do about it.
Affect your health? I mean...
Yeah, early on, nothing. Nothing. It was just like, there's a grenade in your pocket and it's going to go off at some point. Thanks, dude.
No counting.
Right, yeah.
Just some point in time.
Just at some point. Yeah. And for me, the counting was, it'll probably be between 48 and 50. And so now I'm in my early 20s going like, I'm half done. Keep moving.
Yeah.
Keep moving. And then my uncle got a kidney transplant. And like, that kind of changes things maybe. But it didn't go well. And he ended up back on dialysis. And then he got another kidney transplant. And that went better. And then my dad got one.
So your uncle had 2 kidney transplants?
My uncle had 2 transplants. My dad's younger brother had 2 transplants. And my dad has had 1. And fun part of the story is my dad's surgeon was my surgeon.
Oh, no kidding.
Same guy did the transplant.
Really?
Yeah. So at some point I began to realize like, maybe that 48, 50 thing isn't the real story. But somehow, I don't know, I'd gotten into that gear and I've just kind of stayed in that gear because it's also helped.
It's a good gear.
Yeah, it's helped. Yeah.
Pedal to the metal.
Right. Yeah. So that part's been good. And then I would say right around 40 or so started experiencing various issues with it that are common for people. It's not that uncommon of a condition. I think 1 in 10 people in the United States will experience some sort of kidney issue. I think 1 in 100 will experience kidney failure. It's so high that the kidney transplant is covered under Medicare.
Oh.
It's the only condition that's like that. Everything else has to do with retirement age and, other, massive life type stuff. Kidney transplant and the treatment of the donor, if it's a live donor, all covered. All covered. So it's great. That's great. About 5 to 7 years ago, started to experience flank pain, issues that would put me into the hospital, energy, some beginnings of chronic fatigue that turned into chronic fatigue. And then the function really starts dropping off and then becomes like, okay. Like, you're dying.
And you're seeing a doctor regularly now, probably?
Yeah. I was seeing a nephrologist. I started seeing a nephrologist in Northern California. Right. I went on blood pressure medication because of the kidney condition in Northern California. And that was in my late 20s. So that's when that trajectory started. And then, I would see a nephrologist here in Maine leading up to the transplant, probably quarterly. They were monitoring everything. But then once I qualified to be on the transplant list.
And when did you qualify for that?
A little over a year ago. Okay. It was the fall of 2021. And then I had to qualify. My numbers got bad enough. They're like, yep, we can now start the process. And then I had to get a litany of tests to make sure that, hey, we're not going to waste a good kidney on you if you're a lemon. So, you had to go get checked everything. And that was actually a great blessing. Was like, oh, aside from this, I'm actually really good. My head's good, my heart's good, my lungs are good. Like every other thing is in really good shape. Had to do the nuclear stress test. Like I don't know. I got stuff going through my veins and they're telling me to run.
Yeah.
Right. And I got more wires dangling off, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was great. Everything came out great except the kidney. So that's been encouraging actually. And then, got on the transplant October, November 2021.
2021.
And that's when we started actively looking for a donor and then had the surgery on October 4th. So that might be my new month.
October.
Yeah. That might be my new
it's
month.
It's a good month.
Yeah,
it's October 4th, right?
Yeah.
And the process leading up to you finding a transplant, how did that work? Who was involved in that? How did that all go?
Well, first off, it went great. One of the things that I learned from the transplant team after the fact was the average number of donors for a person on the transplant team is 0.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why most people have to wait for a cadaver. So when I met that side of the transplant team after my transplant, they're like, we've been waiting to meet you. I'm like, why? He's like, because you had like 20 some odd people go through the process for a transplant. I mean, I didn't even know that because a lot of it's kept secret, because of medical information and privacy and all that kind of stuff. So we knew we had people.
So how did those people come up? Were they
that was all KW.
Okay.
It was all Keller Williams. I think 85-90% of the people that raised their hand to start the process were Keller Williams. Yeah, it was
people from Keller. So how did that work? How did Keller Williams get the word out?
We had some great people in our office here. Our OP was one of them. She kind of helped kick things off. I had some great agents. Ann Chinquette was such an advocate. Alyssa Dumond was such an advocate. They were just, we had a lady from our dance program that my kids go to that was a whiz bam of, working with nonprofits and stuff. And so she was involved. And there were just a lot of, it's just this like army within an army that just got the word out. And then a lot of people started the process. And we had so many candidates in the beginning that they had a bunch of people sit on a bench and they went with what they thought were the best candidates. And it looked like we were going to possibly do the transplant in March or April of that year. And every single one of them ended up not being able to donate. And again, talk about blessings. Like one of them found out they had a little bit of a heart condition that they never would have found out had they not gone through it. Not life-threatening, but now something to be aware of and da-da-da. And another one found out they had a little bit of a blood condition that made optional surgery higher risk for them. Never would have known. So there were several things like that I know there was one person who was told you got to lose weight before you can do it and has since lost like 25 or 30 pounds and kept them off.
Wow.
Like, it's just like, man, what a gift.
Yeah. Really.
How come I didn't get that? So, super good. Super good. So then when they kind of had to go back and start the process over again.
They went to the bench.
Yep. And in the process, we'd had people who'd kind of been thinking about it, praying about it. It takes a while for people to become aware and all that kind of stuff. And we actually ended up with 2 great candidates. One wasn't a match for me, but was a match to donate. And they asked her to hold on, and she was a KW agent in our office. They asked her to hold on to see if they could get a direct match. And if not, they would pair me up with another person in need and another donor, and we'd do this little daisy chain where she'd donate to them, their donator would donate to me, kind of a thing.
Sounds like a closing domino.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, exactly.
Not really.
Yeah. But yeah, it's that kind of a thing, like this order of operations. And then the person who ended up being my donor was a fellow Keller Williams agent out of New England. And and he ended up being a match, and a really, really good match. My doctors just keep telling me, I'm just like, man, this is a good kidney. This is a good kidney. was like, don't tell him. He's going to make me pay more.
But he says that you got the lesser of his two, so
Right.
he's happy, right?
Yeah. No, he's good. He's good. Yeah, no. And in fact, I mean, he and I have known each other for a long time. He used to do what I do in Keller Williams, has a great family real estate team.
Mm-hmm.
And
Can we say his name?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. His name's Dan Gervais.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's put it all out on social media.
Yeah.
So, and he services Cape Cod and does a great job. So, and yeah, he's coming up here tomorrow. We're gonna see him tomorrow.
Mm.
He'll probably come by our farm, visit our goats on Saturday morning. So,
Mm.
yeah, he's been a good friend for a long time. So.
Yeah. And we can talk more about where that went from there. So, match, and then they plan a surgery certain date.
Yep.
How does that happen? What's the lead
It's a
up for
little
that?
complicated in that they actually need 2 surgeons and 2 surgical suites side by side to do a live donor transplant, right? Because if God forbid,
Mm-hmm.
somebody is in a motorcycle accident and they get them into the hospital and they can't save them, that's actually a less complicated transplant, right?
Mm-hmm.
The cadaver's already, right? It's not an issue there.
Yeah,
We're not trying to save anybody anymore.
Right.
We already lost that battle. And now we need one surgery suite.
Mm-hmm.
You're on 3-hour notice. So the whole time I was on the transplant list, I only left the state of Maine once.
Wow.
Because every time I left, I had to call them. They had to remove me from the transplant list, and you wouldn't accrue time on the transplant list when you were off it. So as soon as you were 3 hours away, you had to be off the list. So and that was coming right out of COVID. So like for the last 3 years, I'm like, I haven't gone anywhere. I haven't seen anybody. Like,
I got to get out of here.
I just crossed that bridge down to the base of Maine there this past weekend. My aunt was turning 70, and man, it felt good. Felt good. I love Maine, but man, it felt good to get out a little bit,
stretch a little bit.
Stretch my legs.
Yes.
So
yeah.
So. In fact, I had an initial date, and then there was complications, and then it got bumped. And, that's probably the only point where maybe I experienced some discouragement in it, if I'm honest, was the like, is it really going to happen? It just kind of started to feel like it was, and again, what a selfish thought, because there are people on the list 5-6 years, you know what I mean? And I hadn't even been on it a year, but we were that close. We'd been that close since March, April. And then every month it went by, it's like almost. And then we had a date. It was like, oh, finally.
You had the tickets on the refrigerator.
And then the date moved. And it was like, and and here's the other thing. COVID was resurging at that time, right? Cases were going up. If I or my donor or either of the surgeons got COVID, we'd probably have to delay it again. So I went into quarantine for like 2.5 weeks just to ensure that I was doing everything I could not to throw this thing off. And everything worked out. Worked out good.
Yeah.
Worked out good.
So you go into surgery, you got 2 operating rooms.
Yep.
And do you remember any of that?
Nothing.
Probably not.
I saw Dan right before surgery.
Yeah.
We were both in our monkey suits. We took a picture. And
what did he have to do to get ready?
Oh, he went through a litany of tests.
Okay.
Yeah, all the same tests that I had to qualify for. He had to qualify for that and more, because the worst case scenario is they pull a kidney out of somebody who's willing to donate, and then they end up having complications and die. So they're doing everything they can to make sure that's not the case. So yeah, they put him through the ringer. He had to not get COVID, and sign off on all sorts of stuff. It all starts with an interview to try to make sure that I haven't coerced him in some way. And all of the people went through that.
Any potential donors went through that interview, that process?
Yeah. It was kind of like a social worker going like, no, but really, what's he paying you? That kind of thing.
Really?
Yeah. And I get it. I mean, sure. I mean, there are bad people out there too. So yeah, it was an interesting long process. It was months and months.
Did he have to do anything physically to get ready? Other than the test?
No, I think just the testing they put him through, and then showing up, and they're shaving you and poking and prodding, and but yeah, they shaved me up and got an IV prepped and all that kind of stuff, and then went into the surgery. And I remember I thought they were putting oxygen on me. I think this must be a game that anesthesiologists play, right? I thought they were putting oxygen on me. I said, all right, we just want to make sure the oxygen's working. I could take a couple deep breaths. And I woke up in recovery.
Yeah. You didn't even get to count.
Yeah, no counting, no nothing. And I remember looking up and they had this massive surgical light.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, I need a chandelier like that in my room. Yeah, that was it. That was it. I was out.
No shadows here.
Yep. No, I was out. And
How long was the surgery?
7 hours, maybe less. I ended up being in recovery longer than I was in surgery because I think they didn't have rooms, and that actually wasn't so bad because the guy in recovery, like, I think kind of the only thing he was doing was monitoring and giving us pain meds.
Oh,
so he became my buddy pretty quickly. Like, yeah, hey, why don't you give me another shot here?
So, and what's the incision like when they do a kidney transplant?
I don't know what Dan's are.
Okay.
They give you, so this was an interesting thing. They give you a third kidney. So I have 3 right now.
What?
Yeah, I have 3 kidneys.
But Dan only had 1 to give you.
I know.
Where's the third one come from?
His is my third one. I have my
you
originals.
Still have your originals.
Correct. Yeah. They don't, if they can avoid it, they don't want to remove your existing ones while giving you the new one. If you think about what happens is the first thing they do is knock down your immune system. Because your body wants to reject, no matter how good the match is, your body wants to reject this foreign object, right? So they knock down your immune system. Well, they want to minimize how much exposure and surgery and poking and prodding they're doing when your immune system's at rock bottom, right? So they don't want to also have other incisions, other places where you could have infection, that kind of stuff. Because removal of a kidney is pretty serious. I mean, it's tapped into some pretty major arteries, so you don't want to be fooling around.
Enough so that it's 7 hours of surgery.
Well, yeah, something like that. 6, 7.
It's
I don't
a
know.
long time. In
I was asleep at the time.
Yeah.
But my surgery, my kidney is like in my pelvis. It's like right under my belt line.
Okay.
Under my belly button. So that's where the incision starts, and it kind of goes all the way up to my abdomen, or up to, kind of almost under my rib cage. It's tough to I think it's about 10, 12-inch incision, something like that. And I think if there was a second moment in that process that would just felt like, was you leave the hospital and you got a tube hanging out of you that's draining that incision area. And it's so much harder to sleep, to get comfortable, to everything is just made so much. Every movement is complicated, and you're dealing with a lot of discomfort, and it just complicates all of it, But within a week or so, that was removed, and so really started on the mend about 10 days after surgery. So
really,
yeah.
And so, what were you learning through all this? What became new to you, or became reinforced?
Yeah. There's I still haven't figured out how to communicate this, so I'll try again as best I can.
Yeah.
It was so humbling to have so many people willing to even raise their hand, willing to help. I mean, just crushingly humbling. And I know there was part of that had to do with some of the giving that I had done to them, right? And man, shouldn't we all treat each other that way? You know what I mean? Like every day, just put other people first, put them first, and what gifts will come from that. And to me, it was just this momentary incident in my life of like, oh, this is the kind of thing that can come from that. So that was, and the doctors knew it just as I started meeting with them, when they understood what I did and the roles that I played and the network of people that I have. I remember one of the doctors talking to me is like, listen, all you got to do is find a donor and we're going to be done. Like you can have a kid, we can be done with this soup in 3 months. Like just find the donor. Like it's all it's going to take. Like that's the plan. Like just find the donor. I'm like, okay, all right, we'll do it. And so that was a really big deal. To just realize that being in a relationship with people matters. How you treat people matters. Living sacrificially matters. And it shows up in, I'm sure, 1,000 small ways every day. But this was just like, you cannot ignore this moment type of thing for me.
Has it changed your perspective since then?
I'll tell you the one that I'm continuing to struggle with is that timeline piece, right? I spent 47 years assuming a certain timeline to my life and acting that way. And now I have more of an unknown.
You got a bonus.
Yeah, I got a bonus round. You got a bonus round, right? It's a little bonus round. So there is a little questioning of, do I deserve this bonus round? Right? There's a little bit of that goes on. Yeah. There's also a little what do I do now? Like, I understand what I've done. Am I supposed to be doing something different now? Dramatically different now?
Yeah. Was there a pressure to do more now?
Right.
And still, or has
it
waned?
I don't know if it's more, but it's definitely different. So I'm definitely looking at things of seeing the places where, for whatever reason, I was playing smaller than I should have. And just wanting and making sure that, because I find when we play small, it's usually for selfish reasons. Oh, I don't want to make a fool of myself. What if I fail? Or I'm comfortable, right? I'm comfortable. Why stretch? Why do? Well, think about the other people you could impact. What if you did? Whose lives could you change? Who's, in small ways and big ways and da-da-da. So, yeah, so I think it's been a lot of that kind of stuff. And I'm still going through it. I'm 6 months out from the surgery, and I'm still
only 6 months.
Yeah. I'm still kind of in that mental process of like, I wonder what that should look like. And I've got a coach that I work with, and that's probably been a third of our conversations since I, got back on the wagon, and it's been good.
How does that timeline impact your coaching and working with other people who don't have that advanced timeline?
Sure. Yeah, it's I've had in the world of Keller Williams, and Simon Sinek talks about it too, of you're kind of a big why, right? What's your big why? And I spent years within the Keller Williams system talking about that, teaching that, and not having it. And then maybe my month is October, November, because it was like in October, November, I was at a training with Gary Keller, founder of Keller Williams, and he said something I'd heard him say 1,000 times, which was, in real estate, you can be anywhere you want in 5 years. And it literally like went in my ear like Charlie Brown's teacher, like wah, 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 like whatever, Gare Bear, like heard it all before. And then it hit me that 5 years before that-ish, I'd wanted to be the team leader of Keller Williams Realty in Portland, Maine. And they had a great team leader at the time. So that wasn't happening. Mark Richard, dear friend, investor, owner in the market center, was our team leader at the time.
Right.
And blessed to know him too. And he was the team leader. So I started looking for other opportunities, which led me to being a team leader and where I was that day when I heard that. And as I sat there listening to Gary, I had already accepted the role to come back to Maine and be the team leader. I was going to start 1 month later in January. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks, like, son of a gun, Gary, you're right again. I had another day and a half, I think, with Gary that day. And this is probably the only time in my life that I've spent time with him and I didn't listen to him because I'd gotten all I needed out of that session. And I spent the rest of the time writing. And I just went on a furious journey to figure out my big why was, what I wanted the next 5 years to look like. And so as I help people now, that experience is still very formative for me. And I think there's a lot of people who haven't gotten to that step yet. And one of the huge insights I got from that was when you really get that clarity, a couple of things happen. One, you start attracting the right people to you. Like, it starts happening. Two, the things you thought were going to take 5 years, some of them you're going to get done in 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm there.
Right. Yeah. And so, yeah, the clarity piece of that and really having that alignment is a really big deal. And I don't think it's going to be a major rewrite to my big why, but it's opened the door to re-examining it, which I think is I think that's a great thing, because it's been 9 years since I came up with my big why. So it's like, yeah, it's probably time to dust that baby off and just, pressure test it again.
Yeah. I think there's some greatness, though, in being able to get to there and helping other people along the way, and to be able to, I think it's great to be able to say where I am or where I'm going, where I want to go is still okay.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't have to change.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And like I said, if there's, I'd be surprised if there's major rewrite, but I think that's also part of what we have to do. We have to be open to the possibilities of, God's going to put something else in your path, and he's going to give you a nudge, and you got to listen to that, so however it shows up. So.
And, within life, and certainly Gary Keller has set up the model with the 7 different, areas of life. And, how do you see those different areas coming together for you in the next 5 years, or since your kidney transplant too?
Well, I'll give you one that just happened to me in the last 10 days. So this is in the last 10 days. My financial goal for a long time, has been to be in a financial position where I just didn't have to think about money at all. Because the time I spend thinking about money doesn't ever feel like quality time. I compare it to the time I spend on a plane. Like, I've sat up against the bathroom in the back where the seat doesn't recline at all.
Yeah.
And I've sat in the front row of first class. I've sat in every seat in between. And there really isn't much quality of life you can give me on an airplane. Like, I'd rather drive. I'd rather drive all day long. And I'd rather not be on a plane. And reviewing personal financial stuff, reviewing household budgets and all that kind of stuff. We do it as a family. They've been important tools. Man, I don't like spending the time doing it. So to be in a financial position where I just don't have to spend time or energy on that topic because of how we've positioned ourselves, that to me has been the goal. Like, how little time can I spend thinking of it because we're doing so well effectively, or we're so responsible with the resources we have, or what have you.
It's not that it's not in place. It's that you have it in place.
Correct.
And it's on autopilot.
Right. We've done the hard work, and now we don't have to spend a lot of time on it.
Right.
It's a meeting for an hour once a year, as opposed to maybe monthly or weekly, depending on where you are. What I've realized is, yes, that is my goal. But that's my goal for the day I retire. And between here and there, I have a responsibility to spend time on money, on financials. I'm involved in several different businesses. I need to spend time on those financials. I need to continue to develop that muscle, develop my wealth building muscle, because it's part of my job. It's part of what I signed up for. And if the outcome is I don't spend much time thinking about money the last day I put my boots on, great. Great. That's awesome. So I think that's an adjustment that has happened just in the last, like I said, last 10 days.
Interesting.
So yeah.
Well, you have the opportunity, and you'll continue to be a difference maker in people's lives, for sure.
We'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
You certainly have engaged with us and helped us dramatically with our business from time to time, and I can see it in other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. It's one of those funny things where when most people, when they see what I do in a day, their reaction is, "Oh, thank goodness I don't have your job." And I love it. I love doing it. I love interacting with people. I love those moments. I remember sitting with your entire team. We had a nice private room. We sat with the whole team the last time we all got together as a group. I mean, that day stands out to me today, and that had to be 18 months ago, or 2 years ago,
Probably
maybe.
2 years ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago. Clearly, I don't remember the timeline. But it was great, and I get to do that a lot. And man, it's hard for it to feel like work, especially when you used to build sets for, trade shows and movies and all that kind of stuff. And you come home and your back hurt and you're covered in sawdust and sweat.
Yes.
Anything I do now is it doesn't feel like work. It just doesn't.
So family and family life, you live in an area where you have some livestock, let's say.
We do. Yeah, that's a mania that the Knowles family has gotten into. About 4 or 5 years ago, my daughter got involved in a 4-H program having to do with dairy goats. And so we got 3. Ask me how many I have today.
How many goats do you have today?
We have 24.
24 goats.
Yes, Rick, we have 24 goats, and somehow that seems normal. Yeah, that's normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you do with 24 goats?
You build a barn.
Okay.
That's what you do.
Yeah.
And so we just finished building that barn. I would call it done, 2-3 months ago. So all the goats are in there. It was in time for our kidding season. And we had 14 babies so far. We've got one more mom to go.
So you had 10, now you have 14, basically.
No, we were at 12.
Oh, you were 12.
Wait, what's the math? Oh, we have 26 goats.
26 goats.
There we go. Because we came into the season with 12.
Okay.
And we've had 14 babies. So, yeah. So we're at 26, and we have another mom to give birth in about a month. So we'll probably end up with around 28. And then we'll start weeding down, over time. But, my 2 daughters were out there last night, milking, feeding, shoveling, doing all that stuff. And for me, the goats are lovely. I love having a barn. I love having a tractor. It's lovely. What I love about it is it's really hard to teach a farmer's work ethic without a farm. So get the farm. Get the farm, because it doesn't matter how you feel this morning. The goats still need to get milked and fed. So you got to get up.
Yeah.
Your emotions cannot be your decider. And that to me is awesome. Because you take that and apply it to anything, you're going to be successful. Will you be the best? Well, that I don't know. That's going to have to do with your gifts and who your competition is and your passion and all that kind of stuff. But you're going to do well. You're going to do well. It could be in the arts. It could be in customer service. It could be in tech. You're just going to bring a focus and a work ethic and a consistency that most don't have.
So your kids are learning that, obviously.
They are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think if I have a parent hack, it's find something they're passionate about, commit to it as long as it has that coming out the other end, right? You know what I mean? And nothing against the sports people of the world,
right?
But one of the things I love about it is literally like, you're sick. That's nice. Get up. You got to do the goats.
Your animals aren't sick.
Yeah. Yeah. They still need to be fed.
Yes. And if they are sick, they need more attention.
Yeah. So my daughter missed a few days because she was really under the weather, had a temperature, and da-da-da. Well, guess who had to pick up disproportionate? My other daughter. Now, are mom and dad helping out too? Is it a family affair? Of course we are. Of course we are. But that piece has been, the more we've done it and the more I've had that glimpse of that, I'm like, oh yeah.
This is good.
I'm investing in this. Yeah. This to me is, we talk about legacy, right? And I think when a lot of people talk about legacy, they look at it almost entirely through a financial filter, wanting to leave a monetary legacy. And I don't fault that at all. I do think people who are passionate about that should really look at the track record of what that usually turns into, because it usually disappears, right? So it can't just be the money part. You have to also be teaching a responsible, set of values around money. Not only teaching it, but be teaching the ability to teach it. Because if you just teach it and the next generation gets it but can't duplicate it, then it's still going to be lost. I like the work ethic legacy. I do like that. Because, man, I've hired a lot of people. And I've hired a lot of people who were way more gifted but didn't have that piece. And that piece counts.
What do they say about work ethic versus talent?
Oh, take work ethic all day long.
Any day.
All day long.
Yeah.
All day long.
Yes.
Everybody's got talent. Everybody's got talent at something, right? Not everybody's got a work ethic. Well, I guess that's new. Not everybody has a work ethic I'm interested in. Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's one of the things that I love about the state that we live in. You tend to find it a lot up here. You really do.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, there were a lot of employers that wanted to plant their businesses here in the same way that there were steel mills that wanted to build steel mills in farm country because they wanted to hire farmers.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted that work ethic. They want,
Mm-hmm.
and they brought them here, and they wanted to hire the people that worked at canneries and worked in the lumber yards and worked, on the lobster boats. And it's like, yeah, they're going to work.
Mm-hmm.
My first job was working on the Portland waterfront, and the guy picked me up at 4:00 in the morning. We got a, blueberry muffin at Becky's, and we got on the dock. We were there about 4:45, had to beat the lobsterman to it. And around what I thought was lunchtime, I asked, hey, how long are we working today? Because he was also my ride home.
Uh-huh.
He's like, oh, we just do half days. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So I'm figuring, hey,
Lunchtime.
we're about we're wrapping up. 12 hours.
Mm.
Half day.
Half day.
Half day. Like,
Half day.
good to know.
Yes.
Good to know. All right. Here we go. That was at 15.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right. And, when you set that as a baseline of like, yeah, let's just do that for a while. I don't know. Good stuff comes from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
You've seen as you are seen, as an authentic person by our team. What does being authentic mean to you?
Oh my. Yeah. I think being authentic is not knowing how to define authentic. For me, authenticity, I think, really comes from a place of not caring what other people think about you.
That's a tough barrier to break.
Yep.
You can read a lot of books and listen to a lot of things about not caring about what other people think about you.
Yeah. I think as a society, we've moved the dial pretty well against getting wrapped up in the negative that other people say about you, right? Ignoring the trolls on Twitter, right? Like, people, I think, have begun to build that muscle, have found ways to be like, yeah, I don't even look, or I don't get engaged in that, or da-da-da-da. So I think there's been progress there. I think the danger is actually way more on the other side. Aren't you awesome? You're great. Aren't you sharp? Well, that's the same stuff you got to ignore. It's just as much a trap, because people end up building their self-worth or eroding their self-worth on the existence or lack thereof of either of them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can get to a point where you go like, yeah, it's all noise. It's all noise. It doesn't matter. It's like the only opinion that matters is me and my maker, right? And I will say where the one that I allow sneak in is my wife. I really value my wife's opinion,
but that's almost a single, genuine, authentic source,
right? Well, and it's also, I come from a Christian, morality, I would say, and we talk about marriage as two becoming one. So for me, that really is a inner dialogue. It's an inner dialogue. What do I think about me? And authentically looking in the mirror, I think it's not easy to do, and everything. That's obviously an overstatement. Most of what our society puts in front of us through a screen is pulling in the opposite direction, right? It just is. It's all the social media, all that stuff. It's the exact opposite of what I just said. So that's not an easy thing. I know it's not. But if any of your listeners can work to cultivate that muscle, even in small ways, it still surprises me that even within our own company that we give out awards for stuff. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? You run a business. Yeah. The award is
you're in business still.
Yeah. You get to work with great people. You get to service great clients. You get to change people's lives. So that's the reward. Why are we giving out pieces of plastic? I genuinely don't get it.
Yeah.
And when you study human behavior and all that kind of stuff, you realize there are people that are really moved by recognition. So that's also a real thing. So I'm not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But yeah, for me, that's probably the singular thing of getting to a point where I just don't. And I think what's helped for me is like, I'm not exactly the eye candy of the business, So like, I've never felt like I was like, oh, my first impression is what's going to get people. Like I've never had that thought in my life. So it's like, it's got to be more about the content of my character and the words that I use and all of that kind of stuff. It's got to go beyond the first 90 seconds, you know? So that's just something I've had to work on anyway, right? If we're going to connect at all, it's not going to be on the first impression. It's going to be on the second and the third and the fourth, right?
Gotcha.
So yeah, I think that's a place.
Do you think you also you mentioned integrity, or it's mentioned in your Knowles development quite a bit. Does authenticity play into that integrity? How do you develop integrity amongst people?
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. One of the predominant thoughts I have about integrity comes from something John Maxwell had shared. He gets approached a lot to write a book about integrity in business. And he says, I can't write that book. He's like, why? He's like, you're such a person of integrity and you write all this stuff on leadership and business and it seems like a natural thing. It's like, no, because integrity in business isn't a thing. Integrity is a thing. You either have it or you don't. It either shows up in all areas of your life or it doesn't. It's not an on and off switch. You don't have it at home, then walk out the front door and then turn it off, right? Like,
yeah, that's a miscue when you.
Yeah,
there are those that appear to be able to turn it on and off,
right?
And that's not
that
authentic.
means you don't have it.
You don't have
it. You don't have integrity.
That's right.
Right. It means your word doesn't really matter. If you're selective about who your word matters with, then it doesn't matter. And believe me, like I fall short. So yeah, yes, I think it is a place to begin the integrity conversation is being honest and authentic with yourself. Being honest and authentic with your spouse. Just had a great breakthrough with my wife recently of, she tends to carry more of the stress and more of the anxiety, and I tend to not. And so I tend to hold back a little bit on sharing when things in business are stressful, and going deep in that conversation, realize like, oh, that's not helping, right? Trying to shield her from the whirlwind that is my business life actually isn't helping her or our relationship. So it exposed this little area where it's like, oh, I thought I was doing something good, and the reality is I'm not really being as authentic as I should be. Okay, all right. Well, here it comes then. Let me tell you about today.
We're going to do some sharing.
That's right. Here we go. Get a notepad.
Yes.
Yeah. So
your jacket.
Yeah.
Knowles development. No, actually it says, welcome to leadership.
Yeah.
It's all your fault.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, I think obviously it's a bit tongue in cheek. And I think it's also the mindset that a leader should have. If you're signing up for leading something, you're signing up for taking responsibility for the whole thing. The whole thing. This is a Rick Bisson podcast, right? Now, your name's on it. Obviously, other people are helping you with it, right?
I have great people helping me with it.
Exactly. If something goes wrong with it, it's you. It's you. Now, I'm not saying other people who are involved in it shouldn't take responsibility for their part of it. Of course they should. And as the leader and the person whose name's on the thing, like, it's all you. The choices that are made, the creative choices, the fact that we put it out or didn't put it out without previewing, who we've hired, who we've decided to stay in business with, the budgets, everything. People tend to run away from that, is what I find. When they understand it, they tend to go, ugh, that's not for me. The gift that they're missing is if you make that mental leap and you go, oh, I'm in charge, which means it's also fully my responsibility, which means it's my fault. It also gives me an infinite amount of ability to affect it. Only by taking ownership of it do I then have the ability to make change, to improve it, right? To make the adjustments. If I instead just think about taking the opposite choice. If I take the opposite choice and go, well, man, if Billy Bob hadn't, right? If I start pointing the fingers instead of looking in the mirror, right? I'm literally every time I do that, I'm giving up my ability to affect change there. because I'm not taking responsibility for it. So I just think it's a great starting point. It's a great way to wake up in the morning and go, I'm in charge. I'm the leader. It's all my fault. Okay. Now let's go see what we can do to fix it. Right?
Maybe along that line, but maybe a little different. You have people who are leaders who they own it to the extent that it's their ego that drives everything. How do you coach somebody to realize that their ego is in the way of them breaking through to their full potential?
I love it. What comes to mind instantly is oftentimes the ego shows up in the same area where people can't let go. So just because you own the outcome of it, which is what really this is talking about, right? It's welcome to leadership. It's all your fault. You're owning the outcome of everything, right? It doesn't mean you're supposed to be doing everything. And that's where a lot of leaders fall down. They literally wake up and think, no one can do it as good as me. And again, this is where I think the authenticity comes from. I think you have to adopt the mindset of like, of course there are people who could do it better than you. We just hit 8 billion people on the planet. When I was born, it was 4 billion. So it's grown 2 times since I've been alive, right? And of course, there's nothing. Other than being Brad Knowles, there's nothing I'm best at. Zero. So my job as a leader is to get in business with the best people and then get out of their way. Set expectations, shared vision, shared goals, all that kind of stuff, and then be constantly asking, how can I support you? How can I help you? If instead I walk around like my stuff don't stink and nobody can do it as well as I can, well, we got a big problem. Like right there, we have a huge problem. And sometimes that takes a long time for people to really get. And I think what's interesting in people's leadership development is they'll hit breakthroughs with that. They'll let go of something that they really had a hard time letting go of, and that helps them break through to the next level of leadership, next level of business. And then what they don't understand is like, you're going to keep finding stuff. You're going to keep finding stuff that you're resistant to let go of. And mastering that ability at each level to go like, hey, that's yours. And are they going to do it as well as you did it the first? No, of course not. And that's, I think, where a lot of the ego shows up too, is like, if you understand how people learn, which you should as a leader, you shouldn't be surprised by the fact that their first 15 attempts at a thing are going to be worse than yours. That's the most likely outcome. And that's also where all their learning is going to happen. So if you actually want to get to the end of the rainbow of you don't have to do everything, you got to live through that every time with every person. You got to live through that part of it. So some people are just, they want to move faster than that. They have a hard time functioning with other people, playing nice in the sandbox. All that stuff, I think, is ego driven. When people act like that, there's an aspect of fear, I think, at the base of it. If they let go of it, they're not in control. And if they're not in control, they're going to worry, and they're going to worry because they're afraid. And
what else are they going to do?
Right.
Meaning, where do they go if they're not doing that thing?
Right.
It's an easy place to hide, so to
speak. Big time. And in a lot of businesses, it means you have to do more of the hardest stuff. By getting that thing off your plate, you now have to do 3 times as much of the hardest thing in your business, which for some might be hiring, which is a really challenging thing to do. We're doing some of that right now at KW, and it's tough every time. It might be generating new business. That's not easy. That takes a lot of work. Okay. So sometimes it's an avoidance of that. No one can do it as well as me, so I'm going to keep doing this stuff. And that allows me to hide from the demon I don't really want to face.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. Great conversation. Anything else that you'd like to pass along?
That's a great question. One of the things we say in KW a lot is be nice. You know what I mean? It's like one of the parts of our culture, just like be nice, be nice. And it is so surprising to me when people don't do that, and you are such a great example of that. I've never not had an experience with you, quite honestly, of anybody in your family that I've had the pleasure of spending time with, where I've walked out of it going like, man, they're awesome. They're great. And it really is. It's this like, you care about other people. It's genuine. You feel it the moment I get to see you. And to me, that's like at the root of it. I was like, just be nice. Just be nice. That's all you got to do. Like, just treat your fellow man well.
Yeah.
You know, how many problems in our world would just go poof, gone if we all just did that?
Yeah. The golden rule.
Yeah. Yeah.
Simple.
It's like, and I think that's the problem with it is, oh, it's got to be more complicated than that. It's like, no.
Yeah.
It isn't.
That's right. Isn't. Yeah. It's simple.
It's simple.
It may not be easy.
Yeah. Well, yeah, sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I would, treat people like you'd want to be treated. That's probably a really big one. And I think the few people you meet in life that really live that out, not selectively, but fully, tend to be the people that we're attracted to. So if you want to lead people, if you want to make a difference, you want to make an impact, start by doing that. Yeah.
And if people would like to learn more about coaching, kidney transplants,
anything.
How do they get in touch with Brad Knowles?
Yeah, they can check out our website, knowlesdevelopment.com. Knowles is spelled just like Beyonce Knowles, so you can do that. That's probably the best way to find us and get information, or swing by Keller Williams' office in the state of Maine. You'll probably find me. So yeah, any one of those. Or come by the farm and help milk a goat at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's funny. I don't get many takers on that one.
Yeah. Maybe I will someday.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime.
All right. Well,
Awesome.
Brad, thanks for the time.
Hey,
Appreciate
thanks
you making
for
the
having me.
commitment. Thanks for all that you do in the lives of other people around you, because you are someone who is very authentic and brings great integrity to everything that you do.
That means a lot coming from an authentic person like you. It really does. Thank you.
Thanks.
You bet.